Good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Welcome to our live coverage of the latest mission from Vandenberg Space Force Base. I'm Will Robinson Smith. I'll be conducting our commentary for the duration of this coverage. We're broadcasting as we always do from the Spaceflight Now News Bureau here at NASA's Kennedy Space Center. Hope you've all had a wonderful and productive week. I know there have been some graduations around the country here in the United States, so big congrats to all of those in the class of 2025 who got to turn their tassels, throw their caps in the air, and mark a new chapter in their educational journey. Appreciate all of you who are being with us here on a Friday afternoon over on the West Coast, evening here on the East, as SpaceX prepares to launch its latest Falcon 9 rocket from Vandenberg Space Force Base, carrying a total of 27 Starlink V2 mini satellites up into low Earth orbit. Our Spaceflight Now editor, Stephen Young, is running the technical operations of the broadcast today. Our photography crew has this launch off, although they are getting ready and prepared for a planned flight from Cape Canaveral Space Force Station coming up here tomorrow afternoon. So if you're not already following the fellas on X, you can find them at their handles here. You've got John Pisani at John Pisani Photo, Michael Kane at MD Kane Jr., and Adam Bernstein and A Burn NYC. Be sure to follow Spaceflight Now, also at Spaceflight Now. You can find us on X as well as Blue Sky, Threads, and Facebook. As we're getting things started here, I want to thank the nearly 1,000 of you who are watching with us live as we get things going. If you haven't already, you could do us a big favor just by clicking the like button, share the stream, allow us more folks to find their way into this live launch coverage. Also want to thank our wonderful channel member community who make these live launch opportunities possible. So thanks to folks like the Rocket Girl, Glenn A., Cumulus Granatus, Sulfur for Lunch, and many others. Jim Fowley, good afternoon to you. Safety Chuck 2, hello, hello. Channel membership comes with a number of perks, including discounts at our online shop, that is shop.spaceflightnow.com. Access to member-only videos here on YouTube, access to our members-only Discord server, and of course the ability to watch all of our live launch liftoff moments from here in Florida in 4K. Also want to thank our moderator in the live chat today, Jeff Hansen, holding it down. Just cruising to see. I see Rick Donner's also with us as well. If any of the other moderators happen to pop on in over the course of the broadcast, be sure to give them a big old hello. You can make their job so much easier just by following the rules of the live chat. We ask that you refrain from delving into overt politics or religion. Remember to converse in English so that our moderators can respond as appropriate. We ask that you refrain from using all caps when you type whatever you want to talk about. And, of course, that you treat everyone with kindness and respect. Speaking of kindness, I hope you'll also indulge in my less than back to 100% voice. I certainly appreciate Stephen taking the commentary reins earlier this week, as I was vocally very much down for the count. So it's back on the mend here, not quite back to 100%. So appreciate you bearing with me as muddle through the impacts of the Florida pollen season, which just seems to be getting worse and worse every year. But I digress. Speaking of things that are not necessarily getting worse, but actually looking fairly nice out there, taking a look out at the skies over Vandenberg Space Force Base as SpaceX is getting ready to launch this Falcon 9 rocket. You can see just a pesky little spot of cloud is hanging over the Space Force Base there on the West Coast. Being this is a daytime launch, it may be a little bit harder for those who are not in the immediate Vandenberg vicinity to see this flight. So hopefully the skies are clear where you're watching, and if you are able to catch a glimpse of the Falcon 9 as it makes its ascent from the pad there at Space Launch Complex 4 East, be sure to let us know on social media. Love to see whatever you're able to capture. You can tag us again. Our handle is simply at Spaceflight Now. Referencing back to our channel member community, I want to thank member Beverly Knuckles for gifting 10 Spaceflight Now memberships. Really appreciate that, Beverly. Thanks for growing our community here on YouTube. To our 10 newest channel members, welcome aboard. We're glad to have you with us. If you haven't already, be sure to thank Beverly in the live chat. We hope you decide to stick around with channel membership. Last but not least, if you have a comment or question about this mission or other goings-on in the realm of space and spaceflight, you can use the YouTube Super Chat feature to get your comment elevated. Not only will you be giving us some interesting things to talk about as we cruise on through the count, but you'll be supporting what we do here at Spaceflight Now, and that, my friends, is always greatly appreciated. If you're coming to the broadcast from one of our social media posts, you'll notice that our post mentioned that SpaceX has begun fueling its Falcon 9 rocket, which you could also infer from where we are in the countdown process if you've been with us for a previous Falcon 9 flight. About 23 and a half minutes remaining on the clock before the planned launch of this Falcon 9 rocket. So let's go ahead and step through the countdown timeline and let you know what milestones we're looking forward towards as SpaceX gets ready to launch this bird. Stepping briskly through the milestones that we've already passed through. Of course, things get rolling with SpaceX giving the go-ahead for the start of fueling. The go-no-go poll conducted nominally at the T-minus 38-minute mark. Once fueling is allowed to commence, 35 minutes out, prop load begins with RP-1, a rocket-grade kerosene flowing on board the Falcon 9's first and second stages. At the same time, liquid oxygen begins flowing on board the Falcon 9's first stage. 30 minutes out, a cryogenic helium begins loading on board the pressure vessels in the first stage. Same is true on the second stage about 5 minutes afterwards. The helium is important because it's used to pressurize the main propellant tanks during flight. Most recently, we just passed the second stage RP-1 tank filling being complete. Coming up next is the strong back chill down process as SpaceX thermally conditions the feed lines there at the pad ahead of second stage liquid oxygen load. That chill continues until about 30 seconds before second stage LOX begins at the 16-minute mark. Rolling right along, T-minus 7 minutes is when the chill down of the 9 Merlin engines gets underway. That's when SpaceX flows a small amount of liquid oxygen through the plumbing and turbo pumps of the 9 Merlin engines at the base of the booster. It helps to protect the engines from the risk of thermal shock and damage during the startup sequence. 6 minutes out from flight, the first stage kerosene tank is full. Then at T-minus 4.5 minutes, we'll see the strong back retract sequence get underway. It starts at the clamp arms just beneath the payload fairings opening up, and then the transporter erector, the strong back, reclines about 13 degrees away from the Falcon 9 rocket here at Vandenberg. It stays in that position up to and through liftoff. 3 minutes out, the first stage liquid oxygen tank is full. Same is true on the second stage about a minute afterwards, at which point the Falcon 9 rocket is fully loaded with 1 million pounds of propellant. In the final 60 seconds, as we hear the call that the Falcon 9 is in startup, control of the countdown is handed over from the ground sequencer to the Falcon 9's onboard flight computers, and the propellant tanks are brought up to flight pressure. SpaceX launch director will give their go for launch 45 seconds before takeoff. The engine ignition command is issued at T-minus 3 seconds, and if all 9 Merlin engines are healthy and ignite as expected, the command will be given for the hold down clamps to release the Falcon 9 rocket for a T0 liftoff. Coming up here at 3:32 p.m. Pacific, 6:32 p.m. Eastern, 22:32 UTC for our friends around the world, or just about 20 minutes and 20 seconds from now. Also at this point that the so-called big vent should be getting underway, had we eyes on the Falcon 9 at this point in the countdown. For those who were with us for the Falcon 9 launch earlier in this week, got a nice little debut of a brand new Falcon 9 first stage booster. Say we don't see that too terribly often, but as it so happens, we've seen now 4 first stages make their first flight so far this year. We had B-1092 flying back in late February, and B-1093 made its debut on April 7th. That was followed later that month by B-1094, and now B-1095 has joined the party. Booster on deck for today, very much not in that class. It is flying not for its first time, but rather for an 18th time. Still doesn't make it one of the flight leaders for SpaceX. Run quickly through those boosters that carry that distinction. Of course, leading the pack be 1067 with 28 flights, followed by 1063 with 25, 1071 with 24, and 1069, 23, and 1076 with 21 so far. Here's where SpaceX stands as far as flights on the year so far, just one behind, tying the total number of Falcon 9 and Falcon Heavy launches that it established back in 2022. Mark how far they've come in the years since, where the year's record is now just where we are sitting about a week before the end of May. SpaceX had set initially a goal of reaching about 170 Falcon 9 launches on the year. They're going to need to quite notably pick up the pace if they're going to try to reach that milestone, though. Now about 17 and a half minutes to go, about a minute left on the so-called big vent as locks load on the second stage, gets ready to start. Let's take a moment and talk about where this Falcon 9 rocket is going to be flying once it does leave the pad. After takeoff from Space Launch Complex 4 East, or Slick 4E at Vandenberg, Falcon 9 rocket will fly in a southeasterly trajectory with the first stage booster targeting a touchdown on the drone ship, Of Course I Still Love You. Again, the booster flying tonight, going for its 18th flight today. B-1075. SpaceX is aiming to certify its first stage boosters for up to 40 flights apiece. Same with its payload fairings. The most flown so far is one that has flown for 30 times as of the last SpaceX update on this. SpaceX doesn't often talk about its payload fairings, so it's a little bit harder to track the records set for that part of the company's reuse agenda. Once down in the water, though, SpaceX will bring those fairing halves aboard one of its recovery vessels, bring it back through port, and then refurbish them, turn them around for future flights. Going back just a hair here to talk about the booster landing. I'll run through that animation for you one more time. Today's touchdown on the drone ship, Of Course I Still Love You, if successful, will be the 131st time that a booster successfully touches down on this particular drone ship, and it will also mark SpaceX's 450th successful booster landing to date, if all goes to plan. Now, less than 15 and a half minutes to go before the planned launch of this rocket. At this point, SpaceX is loading liquid oxygen aboard the Falcon 9's second stage. Taking a look at the live chat here, I want to thank Jeff Hansen, one of our wonderful channel members and moderators, for $5 super chat. Appreciate you, Jeff. Who says, "Go Vandy, go SpaceX, go Falcon 9, go Starlink, Godspeed 1075." Also want to welcome Boats G, our newest channel member, joining us with membership at the pad leader level. Glad to have you with us, Boats. Shifting gear to the payload that's on board the Falcon 9 rocket flying today. Got a stack of 27 Starlink V2 mini optimized satellites, like the ones you see in the picture from a previous launch before on the left-hand side of your screen. Launch today represents SpaceX's 44th Starlink featured flight of the year so far. 43 of these have been dedicated Starlink missions. Starlink 13-1 did have a couple of Starshield satellites as ride shares. The optimized version of the Starlink V2 Mini, notably lighter than their predecessor, weighing about 1,267 pounds or 575 kilograms, as compared to the previous Starlink V2 Mini satellites, which are about 1,760 pounds or roughly 800 kilograms. With their solar panels unfurled, though, they have a wingspan of about 100 feet or 30 meters. They use argon Hall effect thrusters for in-orbit maneuvering. They were built in Redmond, Washington, which is near Seattle, and they'll be deployed at about 180 miles or 289 kilometers in altitude at a 53-degree inclination. Here's a rendering of what the V2 minis look like in their on-orbit configuration, connected by that laser mesh. Now 12 and a half minutes to go here. While SpaceX is readily preparing for the flight of its next Falcon 9 rocket, things are also hopping down in the newly incorporated Starbase, Texas. Now, not just the name of the SpaceX facilities, but a formal city within the state of Texas. Taking a look at Launch Pad A there with the tower and the chopstick arms right now bereft of any of the pieces of the Starship vehicle, but that will soon be changing over the course of the weekend as the Federal Aviation Administration here in the United States has cleared SpaceX for Flight 9 of its Starship program for the launch of an integrated Starship Super Heavy booster rocket. Those pieces and parts will roll out to the pad over the course of the weekend and be integrated for a flight that's targeting no earlier than Tuesday, May 27th. We'll lift off at 6:30 p.m. Central, 7:30 p.m. Eastern. We'll, of course, have live coverage with our friends over at Lab Padre, whose camera feed you're looking at right now. Flight 9 of Starship will look fairly reminiscent of what we've seen from flights 7 and 8. Of course, SpaceX is hoping not too reminiscent and that they'll be able to get past the initial burn of the Starship upper stage this go around with the changes that they've made. Also, unlike previous flights for the Starship program, SpaceX will not be attempting to catch the Super Heavy booster this go around. Rather, as they've noted on their website, they will be having that booster splash down in the Gulf. This is also the first time that SpaceX is using a flight-proven booster to launch its fully integrated Starship rocket. This is Booster 14, the same one that was used on flight number 7. It features 29 out of the 33 original Raptor engines that were used to support that launch as well. You can read all about the upcoming mission, the things that they've changed, and the goals that they have, and what the FAA has to say about all of SpaceX's work towards this launch. That's in an article right now that's fresh on our website, spaceflightnow.com, so you can go ahead and check that out at your leisure. Meanwhile, over at Vandenberg, we're just about 9 minutes away from the launch of the Falcon 9 rocket. And as we're waiting for the vehicle to take flight, let's go ahead and take a moment and talk about the first stage booster that is flying not for its second time, as B-14 is about to, but rather for its 18th time, which means we've got 17 missions worth of flight history to tick off here before we go ahead and see it make that 18th trip to space and back, if all goes well. It first began flying back in early January of 2023. That was on the Starlink 2-4 mission. That was followed up in April of that year by a flight for Tranche 0 for the Space Development Agency, lifted off on April 2nd. Back to Starlink land we go for quite a while for this booster. We had Starlink 2-9 on May 10th, 5-7 on June 22nd, 6-20 on August 8th, 7-3 on September 25th, and 7-6 on October 9th. That was followed up by a couple of synthetic aperture radar, or SAR, satellites. These were SAR, or SARA 2 and 3, lifting off on December 24th of 2023. Back to Starlink land we go for a little bit here. It's Starlink 7-12 on January 29th, Starlink 7-16 on March 19th, Starlink 9-2 on June 24th. Then we have a transporter rideshare mission. This is Transporter 11, sending 116 satellites into a sun-synchronous orbit as part of SpaceX's small sat rideshare program. And then this booster goes back to Starlink land until the present day, as we're closing in on the 7-minute mark in the chill down of the 9 Merlin engines ahead of this upcoming flight. Starlink 9-17 on September 20th of last year, 9-9 on October 30th, 9-13 on November 24th, 11-3 on December 29th, and most recently at Starlink 11-4 back on February 1st. Been more than 100 days since we've seen this booster fly, and it's about high time we do. It's about 6.5 minutes to go, and we're coming up here on the conclusion of RP1 loading for the booster stage. Now, currently about 4 minutes ahead of the planned liftoff of this Falcon 9 rocket. For some reason, SpaceX seems to be having some type of broadcast difficulty on its end. Normally, we'd be getting views of the Falcon 9 rocket at this stage, and we've got views now of the Falcon 9. You can see the strong back is reclined. Fairly overcast right on top of Vandenberg is the view from the Goes West satellite was suggesting.
Stage 1 lock load is complete.
Call there on stage 1 LOX load. We're waiting a similar call on the second stage now. Under 2 minutes now. We should be getting a call on second stage LOX load momentarily.
Stage 2 lock load is complete.
Seeing the venting from the ground gas closeouts there. It's the Falcon 9 fully loaded with 1 million pounds of propellant.
Gas launch closeout has started.
Good call there. Less than a minute and a half to go now before the Falcon 9 takes flight from here at Vandenberg.
Falcon 9 is in startup.
Good call there. We're now just awaiting the SpaceX launch director to give their go for launch. Should be coming up in a few seconds.
Launch director, go for launch.
And with that, we're going to step back on our commentary until the other side of liftoff and listen in for the last 30 seconds ahead of flight.
T minus 30 seconds. T minus 15 seconds. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ignition. And liftoff of Falcon 9. Go SpaceX, go Starlink.
Stage 1 propulsion is nominal.
Vehicle is pitching downrange.
Now 40 seconds into flight, a good liftoff of the Falcon 9 there from Vandenberg.
Power and telemetry nominal.
Coming up on the other side of the first minute of flight will be max Q, the point of greatest aerodynamic pressure on the vehicle.
Falcon 9 is supersonic.
Rocket now traveling faster than the speed of sound. As you can see the California coastline.
Max Q.
Good call for max Q. Soon SpaceX will be chilling the Merlin engine, the vacuum engine, on the second stage as it prepares for the start of its first burn.
MVAC chill.
There's that call for that. We'll see a few events in fairly rapid succession here after minute 2. First stage main engine cutoff, or MECO, when all 9 Merlin engines of the booster conclude their first burn. That'll come up at around T plus 2 minutes and 24 seconds. That'll be followed a few seconds afterward by stage separation, and then the ignition of that Merlin vacuum engine on the second stage. A nice crisp view of the coastline here. Builds a nice shot of the curvature of the Earth as we're approaching MECO.
Main engine cutoff.
Stage separation confirmed.
MVAC ignition.
Good calls from SpaceX, good visuals from the onboard cameras on the Falcon 9 as well. The payload fairings will be deployed here in a few seconds.
Fairing separation confirmed.
The good fairing separation. Following atmospheric reentry, they will splash down to the waters of the Pacific Ocean under the support of steerable parachutes. You can see one of those falling away as we speak. Coming up next, the big milestone we're looking for is the start of the first stage entry burn. That's when SpaceX will use 3 out of the 9 Merlin engines at the base of the Falcon 9 booster to begin to dramatically slow the vehicle down. Now about 4 minutes into flight, the puffs that you're seeing occasionally between the hypersonic grid fins on the left-hand side of your screen, those are the cold gas thrusters, which help the booster adjust its attitude or positioning as it begins to orient itself to target a touchdown on the drone ship called, of course, I Still Love You. Booster now also reaching its apogee in this flight. Looks like it's going to top out at about 116 kilometers in altitude. Now starting to make its descent towards the drone ship. In addition to this being potentially SpaceX's 131st booster landing on, of course, I Still Love You, a successful touchdown today would also mark the 361st successful drone ship landing. Now 5 minutes into flight. Appears to be good trajectories on both the first and second stages. A nominal burn, by all accounts, on that Merlin vacuum engine so far. Now coming up on minute 6 in this mission, and the start of the
Vehicles
first
are on a nominal trajectory.
good trajectory confirmation. Landing burn coming up here in about 10 seconds. Entry burn, excuse me. Jumping ahead of myself.
Stage 1 entry burn startup.
Stage 1 FTS has saved.
Stage 1 entry burn shutdown.
And with the conclusion of the entry burn, coming up next will be the start of the landing burn, in actuality. That's coming up at about 1 minute from now. That will call upon just one of the Merlin engines at the base of the booster.
Stage 2 FTS has
Stage
saved.
1 transonic. Stage 1 landing burn.
Stage 2 is in terminal guidance.
Stage 1 landing leg deploy. Stage 1 landing confirmed.
And with that confirmation, SpaceX has stuck its 450th booster landing to date. And while we didn't hear the call out for the nominal orbit insertion, assuming that that was achieved by SpaceX with its Falcon 9 upper stage, that part of the rocket will now coast until about T plus 53 minutes and 49 seconds. There will be a brief 1 second burn of the upper stage engine to help circularize the orbit. And then the Starlink satellites will be deployed at about T plus 1 hour and 42 seconds post liftoff. With a good liftoff and landing of the first stage booster today, I'm going to go ahead and turn to our mission stats as they currently stand. As we're getting that prepped, want to make a quick note here about the next flight of a Falcon 9 rocket coming up from Vandenberg. That'll be the Starlink 17-1 mission, and that is flying to a 97-degree inclination on a southwestern trajectory. So changing things up a little bit from what we're used to seeing flying from Vandenberg as far as Starlink missions are concerned. It's been a minute since SpaceX has added satellites to cover the polar regions for the constellation. Previously, back in 2023, there was another mission that launched to the 97-degree inclination that also included a Starship satellite as a ride share. Not to say definitively that this mission upcoming will also be a ride share for Starship satellites, one or more than one, but we'll be keeping a close eye on the deployment information that is cataloged by the Space Force. Moving along to our mission stats as they currently stand. With a good liftoff and landing of the first stage booster, B-1075. That brought about the conclusion of actually the 18th flight, not the 17th. Little typo on my end there. This was the 478th Falcon 9 launch to date, the 61st of 2025. This was SpaceX's 142nd orbital launch within the last 365 days, the 126th orbital flight from Space Launch Complex 4 East, and the 194th overall orbital launch from this pad as well. Here's a look back at the bar chart here. SpaceX now tying the record from all of 2022 with this launch on May 23rd. Moving on to some recovery stats. This touchdown to B-1075 marked the 131st landing of a booster on the drone ship, Of Course I Still Love You. That was SpaceX's 361st drone ship landing, and as we mentioned, the 450th Falcon booster landing successfully in program history. Finally, with some industry stats, this was the 21st orbital flight from the California coast. That marked the 65th orbital launch from U.S. soil, the 71st from a U.S. rocket company, and the 111th orbital launch from around the globe. 3 orbital launch mishaps so far on the year. Here's where our pie chart now currently stands. Of course, we've got, in addition to the launch of the Starlink 12-22 mission coming up tomorrow afternoon from Cape Canaveral Space Force Station here in Florida. Flight 9 of Starship targeting next Tuesday. Our next flight from not the United States, but from a U.S. rocket company is coming up with Electron from Rocket Lab, lifting off from New Zealand, Pad A at Launch Complex 1. That is the Full Stream Ahead mission, launching a Black Sky Gen 3 satellite into a mid-inclination circular orbit at 470 kilometers in altitude. Closing us out with some words from the community. I want to thank Ian Lita for a $5 super chat. Says this is the best place to share your love of launches. You guys are the best. Thanks for the kind words, Lita. Always good to see you. Alien UH with a $2 super chat. Thank you, Alien. And also thanks to Lazarus 7049 with a $5 super chat. Really appreciate that support tonight. Still looking for a specific T0 from SpaceX for the launch tomorrow, but the window is opening up at about 1:19 p.m. Eastern, 1719 UTC. We would expect, now that this launch has successfully lifted off, likely once deployment is confirmed of the Starlink satellites on board this mission, is more than likely when SpaceX will give confirmation of the exact timing for the planned launch tomorrow from here in Florida. I want to thank our moderators in the live chat who are helping us out today. Thanks to Aussie Space Girl for popping in, as well as to Jeff Hansen and Rick Donner. Appreciate all of you holding it down in the live chat. Thanks as well to Stephen Young, our Spaceflight Now editor, for running the technical operations of the broadcast. Look forward to welcoming you all back here with our coverage of Starlink 12-22 tomorrow. Weather, it's kind of doing, Florida summer weather things. It's not a washout by any manner of speaking, but also not the most potentially idyllic for a launch tomorrow. We'll, of course, have more to say as we get into the broadcast, but just to give you a quick preview, the window opens tomorrow with an 80% chance of favorable weather, and that slides down to 60%, tracking potential issues with the cumulus cloud rule, the anvil cloud rule, and the surface electric fields rule. So, challenging potentially launch conditions tomorrow, especially if they need to push back further into the window. And that is the same both for the primary launch day on Saturday, the 24th, as well as the backup day on Sunday, the 25th. So fingers crossed that SpaceX is able to find a good pocket of weather at the front end of the window and they can get this thing in the rear view mirror and all will be merry. A nice view, though, from here in Florida right now as we close out our Friday and head into the holiday weekend. If you have travel plans, whether that puts you on a plane, train, or in an automobile, we wish you safe travels on this 3-day weekend here in the United States. For all of us here at Spaceflight Now, I'm Will Robinson Smith. Remember, be good to yourselves, be good to others. Hit that subscribe button on your way out, and we will see you next time, folks. And until then, bye-bye.